I pulled off the forest road around 9 at night and cut the engine. It was the kind of dark you only get when you're far from everything. The trees on both sides of the road were just a black wall. I sat in the car for a minute before getting out. I don't know why. I just sat there. I grabbed my pack from the back seat and found a flat spot between two pine trees about 30 feet from the road. I set up the tent, hung my food bag from a branch, and built a small fire. I ate by the fire, watched it burn down, then stirred the ash completely flat and went to bed. It was around 10:30. I woke up at some point in the middle of the night. There was no sound, no movement, nothing I could point to. My body was just wide awake before my brain even had a chance to catch up. I lay completely still and listened. Wind in the trees, a creek somewhere far below, nothing else. After a while, I calmed down and went back to sleep. In the morning, I made coffee, and that's when I noticed something in the fire ring. In the center of the ash, where I had stirred it flat the night before, there were 3 small stones, sitting in a little cluster right in the middle. I stood there and stared at them. I couldn't remember putting them there. I couldn't think of a single reason why I would have. I stood there for a while with my coffee going cold, and then I told myself I must have done it without thinking. And I moved on. The second night, I heard something in the trees behind my tent. Footsteps and dry leaves. Not fast, not panicked. Slow and careful, the way something moves when it isn't in any kind of hurry. A few steps, then a stop, then a few more steps, a little further to the left, then another stop. I lay there and listened without moving. I told myself it was a deer because deer actually do move like that. After about 20 minutes, the sounds faded away and didn't come back. The next morning, I walked down to the creek to get water. It took maybe 15 minutes each way. When I came back to camp, I stopped at the edge of the clearing. My camp chair was open. I had left it folded up against a tree the way I always do when I leave camp. It was now fully open, sitting upright, facing the trees on the uphill side of the clearing. I stood there and looked at it. Then I looked at the tree line it was facing. Just trees, just shadow, nothing moving. I walked over and folded it back up and spent the rest of the day telling myself it had somehow fallen open and landed that way. I knew that wasn't how chairs fall. That evening I kept the fire bigger than I needed to and stayed up later than I planned. When I finally put it out and got in the tent, I lay there for a long time in the dark. I kept my headlamp right next to my hand. I don't know what time it was when the footsteps came back. Late. The temperature had dropped. The camp was completely silent. Same sound as the night before, but closer. And after just a few seconds, I could tell they weren't coming from the tree line anymore. They were inside the clearing, right outside the tent. I picked up the headlamp. I didn't turn it on. The footsteps stopped. I lay there without moving and without making a sound. A full minute went by. Maybe 2. I started to breathe again. I started to tell myself it was nothing. And then something touched the top of the tent. One slow drag across the outside of the fabric, starting above my head and pulling toward the foot of the tent, 6 or 7 inches. And then it lifted off. Not a branch, not the wind. The slow, even pressure of something being pulled deliberately across the surface. I turned the headlamp on. I sat up and put my back against my pack, and I did not move. The light lit up the inside of the tent, but didn't reach past the walls. Outside, everything was black. Outside, everything was completely silent. I sat like that with my back straight and my light on, and I watched the walls of that tent until the sky outside finally started to go gray and I could hear birds in the trees. Then I unzipped the tent and looked out at the clearing. Nothing there. I broke camp in about 15 minutes. Didn't make breakfast. Stuffed everything into my bag without folding any of it properly. Pulled the tent out of the ground and got it all in the car. Before I got in, I took one last look at the tree line on the uphill side of the clearing. Just trees. Just dark space between them. I got in the car and started driving out. The forest road is about a mile long before it meets the highway. Narrow, 1 lane, trees pressing in on both sides. I drove slowly because the road was rough and the morning light was still low and gray. About halfway out, I came around a bend and hit the brakes. There was a tree across the road. Not a big one. Maybe 4 inches thick. The kind of small tree that grows along the edges of roads. I sat in the car and looked at it through the windshield. Then I got out. The stump was on the left side of the road, low to the ground. I crouched down to grab the tree and move it, and that's when I saw the cut. Clean, diagonal, fresh pale wood at the angle. The kind of cut you get from a handsaw. No splintering, no tearing. This tree had not fallen. It had not come down in the wind. Someone had cut it and laid it across the road. Between when I drove in 2 nights ago and right now, someone had come to this road, cut a tree, and put it across the only way out. I dragged it to the side and got back in my car and drove to the highway without stopping once. I've gone over everything 100 times since then. The stones and the ash I could explain away. The chair I could almost talk myself out of. Even what touched the tent in the dark, after bad sleep, I could find ways to doubt myself. But there is no way to explain that tree. You don't cut a tree across a road by accident. You don't do it in the middle of the night unless you know there is someone at the end of that road who is going to need to drive out eventually. And whoever did it knew exactly where I was.